base. It then has the tall uniform shaft where it all looks the same with the decorative top. That is Chicago School in a nutshell. Base, shaft, capital design with the steel skeleton. Now, I used to begin this tour by introducing a very unattractive building that was home to the Chicago Sun-Times Company. It was here from 1957 until last year when we demolished it. It's set right over here on the right-hand side. This will become the future site of the new Trump Tower. That will be the fourth tallest building in Chicago, climbing to 90 stories. It is not going to be your typical glitzy Vegas-like building that Trump is known for. It'll fit much better with Chicago style. The architect will be Adrian Smith. The building will be postmodern, referencing Art Deco, and it will house multi-million-dollar penthomes along with a hotel and other expensive residences. Continuing with your right side, you'll find this tall black glass rectangular building that is the IBM regional headquarters. Built in 1971, it was the last American building to be designed by the famous architect Mies van der Rohe. Mies van der Rohe is considered to be the father of modern architecture. His philosophy with modern is less is more, meaning less decor on the outside of the building and more function on the inside.
But more is even more.
You see running up the exterior around his idea of decoration. Very simple. That building has a unique feature called a thermal break wall. What that is an actual break between your interior and your exterior walls, and that is to lessen any interference that would otherwise occur with the large amount of computer equipment stored within it. Mies van der Rohe was the director of architecture over at IIT on the south side for many years, and he had a great number of students. One of his students was Bertrand Goldberg. Goldberg preferred to use curvaceous concrete rather than rough rectangular steel. He designed two attractive towers to your right, named Marina City. They're affectionately known by Chicagoans as the Corn Cob Towers. They are postmodern. They were built in 1964 and in 1967, and standing at 61 stories each, they were the tallest reinforced concrete structures in the world. They no longer have that title today, but they were also the first residential buildings built along the river. Goldberg wanted his residents to take advantage of their location, so he had this theme of a city within a city. So originally, these towers housed everything from a grocery store to a bowling alley to a roller skating rink, restaurants, etc. Today, they have the marina for the residents' boats, the restaurant that you'll see, and the House of Blues Theater is attached to one of the towers. The first 18 floors serves as a parking garage for the 900 condominiums above. All the condominiums have no corners. They're all pie or petal shaped, and they force you to be very creative in your decorating styles. However, you get the great trade-off of the view of the city and the river. Also, that shell-like formation of the tower is functional for the reduction of wind shearing at those heights. We're moving ourselves upon a one-block development on your right-hand side. It's called Riverfront Park, and this one consists of two buildings that are joined by a walkway. This first building is formerly known as Hotel Nikko. It is now renamed the Westin Hotel. The Westin features 450 rooms and a French and Japanese restaurant that overlook the river. It is postmodern in style, and you can tell because the windows are bowed. Bowed windows are postmodern architecture. The walkway joins us out to the Quaker Oats Tower. Quaker Oats is the 1987 Skidmore, Owing & Merrill design, and they are a well-known Chicago architectural firm that you'll hear many more times throughout this tour. Quaker Oats climbs 35 floors. It has that blue-green glass trying to replicate the color of the water. You'll see that often. It is modern with its simple lines, and that tower recently sold itself to the American Bar Association and will become home to many, many lawyers. One of the older buildings built along the river is on your right-hand side, built in 1913, designed by George Nimmons. This is the Reed Murdoch Center. Reed Murdoch was originally a wholesale food company in the early 1900s, and this is an excellent example of what a prairie-style warehouse looked like at that time, meaning that it focuses on the horizontal attributes rather than the vertical. The building used to be completely symmetrical with a three-story clock tower in the middle. However, we have since cut off a 20-foot bay from the left end of the building to make way for our LaSalle Street Bridge. Reed Murdoch is under renovation. It will remain a mixed-use facility, meaning it houses retail space, office space, and restaurant space.
2 stories and the whole long of the river.
Coming up on our right is our own snazzy 5-story parking garage. And folks, there's not much to say about it. It's architecturally insignificant, but it is a good example of what the riverfront was used for up into the late 50s. Adjacent to that is the former Helene Curtis headquarters. But originally, when that building was built in 1914, it served as a coffee storage warehouse. Two architects named Booth and Hanson renovated the building in the 80s. They kept the original facade, added the curvaceous lobby at the bottom and the curvaceous penthouse at the top. The building is more eco-friendly than some buildings. It does not have cooling towers along the rooftop. What it does instead is it actually uses the river water to circulate through the basement pipes to help cool the building as part of its own air conditioning system. On our right is what is known as one of the most impressive buildings in the world. Built in 1929, named the Merchandise Mart, it's designed in the traditional Art Deco style by Graham Anderson Probst & White. It was originally built to house the Marshall Fields Retail Company and their showrooms, and it continues to do the same today. The building sits on a 5-acre site that is equivalent to 2 city blocks. It does have its own zip code, along with its own fire department, police department, and post office housed within it. It occupies more than 4 million square feet of space, which made it the largest building in the world in terms of floor space until the Pentagon in DC was built. The bronze heads out in front are a tribute to the merchant princes that helped to build our city. Edward Filene, Marshall Field, and Montgomery Ward, to name a few. And a little fun fact about that building is that when it was built in 29, it cost $38 million to build. It was sold to the Kennedy family following the Depression for $18 million. They held on to it until the late 90s, selling it back for over $600 million, contributing to their wealth today.
Being in the right place at the right time.
Over here on our right is a building that's often described by architects as an assault to the eye. I think it's obvious why. Its name is the Apparel Mart, built in 1977, designed by Skidmore, Owing & Merrill.
Well, they all
It was
gonna go that
originally
way.
built to house 800 additional showrooms for the Merchandise Mart. So originally this building had no windows, and that's because fashion was considered much more attractive under artificial light as opposed to natural. As you can see, the windows have since been knocked out, and they continue to be knocked out. The building is now home to the Holiday Inn, and the Chicago Sun-Times Company has managed to move from one unattractive building on the river to the next. We are going to be entering the north branch of the river, and as we do, behind me and in front of you is a tall building. It is concave to bend with the river. It's named the Residences of River Bend. It is a 2002 luxury condominium complex designed by James DeStefano. This one features 4 townhomes at the base. They're all 4 levels each, and they sell between $1.9 and $2.5 million. The condominiums are housed between the 13th and the 37th floor. One bedrooms begin at around $390 grand. All the units have that loft-like finish with the exposed ductwork. And if you can focus your eyes on the gray glass, it stands above the townhomes at the base and below the condos. That gray glass is home to the parking garage. However, this building is too narrow to have an up and down ramp. So what the residents do here is they simply drive their car onto their elevator up to their own personal parking space, which, by the way, does not come with your unit. You purchase them. They cost $60,000 each, and then you pay taxes and assessments on them yearly. These are the most expensive in terms of parking spaces that I know of along the river.
Sounds about.
Continuing with your left-hand side, you'll find this pink brick building up ahead. That is named the Fulton House. But when it was built in 1908, designed by Frank Abbott, it was called the North American Cold Storage Warehouse. And basically it housed a lot of butter and eggs. In the 80s, the architect Harry Weiss decided to renovate the building. Harry's job wasn't so easy. He discovered the walls of the Fulton were insulated with frozen horsehair. So after removing all of the frozen horsehair, it took him 1 year to literally thaw that building before any renovation could begin. So if you notice, all the balconies are recessed, and that's because the walls are so thick. This same architect, Harry Weiss, is a sailor, and you'll often find little points that he likes to replicate his passion for sailing in his design. So if you notice, he's got the starfish on the building that lead up to the porthole windows near the top. You'll find this in all of his designs. He also designed the very attractive 1990 Chicago River cottages that are coming up on your left-hand side. All the cottages are modeled to look like sailboats.
Yeah.
They stand 5 to 6 levels each. They come equipped with their own private docking area and private elevator, and they occupy 2,200 to 4,200 square feet of space each.
That's lovely, that, aren't they? Look at that, that greenhouse. With solar panels, then, aren't they? Yeah.
The architect George Papa George
Where?
designed Kinsey Park on your left-hand side. Kinsey is a gated private community housing 70 townhomes. All of them are designed to have that European canal-like feel to them.
got a
What's
European
interesting about
canal-like
Kinsey
feel
is
to
it
them.
sold out completely before ground was ever broken to build it. The townhomes sold for $1.2 million each, and before Kinsey was here, this was empty industrial land with nothing but train tracks. If you shift your eyes to the right, you'll find a not too exciting building named the East Bank Club. It is a private health club that's been there since the late 70s. I pointed out because if you notice the ivy, the trees, and the flowers, all that has recently been added in the past few years, and that is to up its appearance for the residents that are now housed on the other side of the river. So folks, it is important to mention that being on the North Branch has had the reputation in Chicago for many years as being the most unattractive branch of the river. And that's because for quite a long time, this is where most of our industry was housed. Most of that industry has since moved out and it's been replaced with these luxury lofts and the luxury condominiums. An example of that industrial replacement is up here to your right. The red brick building used to house the Walls Press Company. The company moved out, the building stood shuttered. Now eventually the windows were added balconies hung. It's now home to luxury condominiums. Their parking spaces go for a mere $25,000. Sticking with the right side, you'll find a tall brown brick building with that green glass again. That's named Park Place, housing condominiums. Here the units are a bit more affordable compared to their neighbors. One bedrooms begin at around $290,000, and the units
Is it estate agent told this as well?
Now, if you keep your eyes to the right after this
About the
bridge,
price.
you'll catch
Price
these
of
two
everything,
innovative
isn't it?
towers. We really won't see anything
Oh,
like them again
swan.
today. Both are rather brand new,
Drums.
designed by the same European architect named Lucian Lagrange. This guy is known to be cutting edge in his designs, and these are a pretty good example as to why. This first one stands tall with the light green glass and concrete. It's a 2002 design named Erie on the Park. To the right is the sister building, 2003 design named Kingsbury on the Park. Both were designed in the European industrial style of architecture. Both are postmodern. And if any of you are wondering where the park is, as are the residents in their condos, this lot to your right is the future site of the park that will soon come. The architect Minoru Yamasaki designed the World Trade Center in New York City. He also designed the Montgomery building to your right. It's the one with the white travertine marble and the blue reflective glass. That is a 1974 building that housed the offices for Montgomery Ward. That retail company went out of business a few years ago. The building has been renovated already. It now houses entirely condominiums. The captain is going to turn the boat for us, and when he does, if you look down towards the bend of the river, you'll find a shorter concrete building that's actually very large in terms of floor space. This one is a 1908 building named The Domain. It served as the original warehouse for Montgomery Ward. So it too has been renovated. 2/3 of it is office space, the other 1/3 is condominiums, and this one features a river walk with shops and restaurants. So is anyone tired of hearing the term condominium yet by this point in the tour? There are quite a few of them along the North Branch, but I promise it does settle down somewhat throughout the rest of the tour. It's interesting because this whole area of the North Branch has been booming with all this building in the past 5 or 6 years. And you have the infamous Cabrini Green housing block project sitting 2 blocks away from these million-dollar homes. So you have a lot of gentrification that's gone on in this area recently, and it continues to go on today and for our tomorrows as well. Now, when I mention this being an industrial area, unfortunately for many years, people would dump their garbage, sewage, dead animal carcass, you name it, into our river. And to be quite honest, it was rather disgusting. So Chicagoans have made a great effort to clean it up, and we are very proud of our recent accomplishment of being upgraded from toxic to highly polluted. Unfortunately, we are dead serious. Also, when I mentioned the Chicago fire, when that fire occurred in 1871, steel was not yet invented. So Chicago was made of mostly wooden structures, and we were considered to be a tinderbox in the middle of a drought. So when the fire burnt, it burnt for 2 days. It burnt 5 blocks to the west, east to the lake, 20 blocks north, and 30 blocks south. It burnt our entire city down, and although we did our best to rebuild ourselves, it really wasn't until 1893 that we had the opportunity to be back on the map as a major city in the U.S. That was the year that Congress announced they're looking for a city to host the World's Fair. Lots of cities wanted this for the business and prestige it would bring, and Chicago knew that they needed it. So what we did was send 2 politicians to lobby for us. These 2 guys were so relentless and talkative in their pursuit that they were nicknamed by the press those windbags from Chicago. Thus the term Windy City, having absolutely nothing to do with our wind velocity and all to do with politics. Chicago was successful in hosting the World's Fair, and in the year of 1893, 28 million people visited our city. That was half the population of the U.S. at that time. We built 200 temporary structures to house them, and we wanted to have a symbol to commemorate the event. So we asked Mr. Ferris to build us the very first Ferris wheel, which he did. And that first Ferris wheel held 36 carts. Each cart held 60 people, and it made one turn every 26 minutes. So the Ferris wheel that you'll see later on in this tour at Navy Pier is commemorating that first Ferris wheel that was ever built more than 100 years ago. Also, many people ask, especially over here where it's so evident, how come all the building and buying going on in the city lately? There's really two main reasons that we came up with. And the first reason more sets the precedent. And the first reason is that about 20 years ago, this city decided that it did not want to sleep on the weekends, meaning we didn't want to shut down Friday at 5 and reopen Monday at 9. So we made a great effort to bring a lot of entertainment to our city, and thus came the festivals, blues, jazz, and gospel, along with many other street festivals. The second reason is the economy, and with interest rates having been rather low in the past. Well known in this city, he was around at the turn of the century, and he's the guy credited with helping to create the blueprint for Chicago. Daniel Burnham designed the first two red brick buildings to your right with the black balconies. They sit at the entrance of the South Branch. They're called the Butler Brother buildings, built in 1912 and in 1922. They originally served as warehouses, and yes, they have been renovated into luxury condominiums. The exterior today models the Italian fortress style of architecture. What I find interesting is keep in mind these homes are rather new to their residents. And the residents in this first building are very upset right now, and rightfully so. And that's because after we pass underneath this bridge, you'll see there's an empty lot in front of their homes at the beginning stages of construction. If something were to be built, it would not only block their view of the river, but greatly affect the property values of their residents. So at this point in time, all construction has been halted while court proceedings continue to determine whether or not they'll be building along this lot. Any construction you do see going on is going on to repair the tracks and not to build upwards. Staying with the right side, you'll find this tall, attractive gray granite tower. It's the Boeing building, built in 1990, designed by Perkins Will and Johnson. It is postmodern, climbs 36 floors, features a metal exterior, 2 shades of gray granite, and gray tinted windows. The architects for the Boeing won a major architectural award for the feat that they accomplished. So keep in mind, the Boeing is sitting on top of 10 sets of train tracks. It also has switching tracks along the southwest corner of the building. When we build over the rail has rights before the builders, meaning you cannot interfere with any train traffic, you must simply build around it. So if you focus your eyes on the south end of the building, which will be furthest from you, and look at the rooftop, you'll see 5 beams that start there and drive their way down the building. They actually drive down into the bedrock of the river to help support the structure. Well, on the west side of the building, the side that we cannot see, we could not have those same 5 beams because we would interfere with the switching tracks. So what the architects did is they had 5 trusses put up on the rooftop. Those trusses work to literally suspend the entire southwest corner of this building, meaning yes, it is actually hanging, and that is how they won the architectural award. Keep in mind, if you were to stand on the west side, you'd see the same 5 beams, but they are aesthetic. They go just below the concrete. And if you look over your right shoulder, you can see one of the trusses on the rooftop helping to suspend the corner of that building.
Oh, yeah.
Moving on, we have a 1925 Art Deco design by Hullibert and Root to your right. It's called the Riverside Plaza. It was one of the first buildings to establish rights over the rail as well as a plaza over the tracks. It's made of limestone and has the vertical setbacks. Those setbacks are intended to draw your eyes upward. As your eyes are up there, see if you can catch a glimpse of that blue cascading glass building with the Citibank logo. I point out the Citibank building because it was built in the late 80s, designed by Helmut Jahn and Murphy, and both Citibank and the architects were highly criticized for the design. So again, look over your right shoulder and check out the top profile of that building. It's said to resemble a cash register, and considering that it has a Citibank, that was deemed very inappropriate. Citibank has responded by saying no, it's supposed to look like a waterfall. However, the criticism stands with Citibank and the architects today. Folks, we're now entering Gateway Center. Gateway Center consists of the next 5 buildings on your right-hand side. All of them are Skidmore, Owing & Merrill designs, built between 1960 and 80. It's got its name because it leads up to our train station, Union Station, that has the reputation for being the gateway to the west. So gateway number 1 that we just passed by, and then gateway number 2 that we're moving upon are 2 identical buildings that are that are the gateway 4 that lesson 4B. They're basically black glass steel boxes that climb 22 floors each. Well, during the week during rush hour, when we have 10 sets of trains going wild underneath, one can barely hear themselves over the mic, so you wonder how the employees would never know they're sitting on top of the rail. be quite honest, the technology is beyond me. I just know if these buildings are padded enough so they not only cannot hear the rail traffic below them, you also cannot feel any vibrations caused by the trains. Gateway number 3 is this next tall building with the white exterior. It was completed in 71, and in the 70s, a new material was popular in architecture called precast. Precast is concrete with fireproof. It's molded off-site pieces that are painted onto the exterior of the building for additional protection. It's that white material. This next little short black building with the X bracing, pretty neat building, I think. Today it is the Union Station Health and Fitness Club. Formerly it was the Mid-America Commodities Exchange. When it was the exchange, there were traders using hand signals. They needed to be clean of any obstruction. So there are no supporting beams or columns in that building. The X bracing that you see is supporting the entire structure. We're moving ourselves from the last of the Gateway Center, creatively named Gateway number 4. This is the largest, and it's also considered to be the most impressive of the center. Impressive mostly because it is key to the building in the river. Now this one is postmodern. You can tell because there are 3 different sizes of rectangular glass. Typically when you see different sized glass on a building, it's usually postmodern architecture. It's also one of the most photographed buildings in the city. It's usually photographed from the Van Buren Street Bridge behind me and from the opposite end of the river. And that's because, as we pull ourselves a little bit further, you look over your right shoulder, the use of glass gives a kaleidoscope reflection. It's also be very pretty for many viewers.
It'll be alright at night and all.
On our right is the Central Post Office, built in 1831 with Art Deco by Graham Henderson Post and White. In its day, it was the 3rd largest post office in the world, and it was intended to take us into the 21st century. While about 20 years ago, that was deemed inappropriate. And before I continue on and explain why, I want to mention that the bridge that we're right about to go underneath is home to the Eisenhower Expressway. That road was built 20 years after the post office, yet it actually penetrates right through the 3rd floor of that building. Technological advances needed. So as it stands, it is vacant, and it has been for more than 15 years. Now there has been talk about turning it into the world's largest indoor used car lot facility. Chicagoans are not real fond of that idea at the moment. There's also been talk about turning it into a hotel conference facility. Ultimately, we will have no say in what becomes of it because we don't own it and the state doesn't own it. It's the feds that will decide its fate, hopefully sooner than later. So our very much needed new Central Post Office is coming up here on your right side. It was completed in '94, designed by Knight Associates. It's 1/3 the size of the original, only 3 levels tall, and it's considered to be state-of-the-art as far as technology. Here the mail trucks drive in, the mail is unloaded, sorted by a laser, and loaded onto another truck. The building itself was a financial disaster. It was supposed to cost $199 million. However, we went a whopping 5 years over our construction date, adding on a lot of money, bringing the final price tag to $332 million. So you can see we haven't had the best of luck with our post offices as of yet in Chicago. If you look to your left up the river, you'll find another curvaceous concrete structure. It may remind you of the Corncob Towers, Marina City. This is River City, same architect Filberg, built in '84. It now houses 450 condominiums, and it has 70 boat slips and a climate-controlled park. On that note, Willie is going to pull us further down the river. When he turns the boat, you're going to get the best view that you get today of the Sears Tower in this part of the Chicago skyline. So I'm going to take a break from the mic, let you stretch your legs, take some photos, and resume the tour in just a couple minutes.
That's the one I took us from Sears Tower, and that's behind us. Which one? This one? I don't know. Concrete always looks like power stations to me.
says tower right near the river.
It's not, well, it's there, but I suppose it is. Lost the valley, suppose, isn't it?
Where's Mark gone?
I think we're in the toilet, I'll get a drink.
Now, if you look down to your right, you'll find a tall limestone building capped with that aluminum statue. That is the 1931 Art Deco Chicago Board of Trade, designed by Halliburton Rooms. It climbs 44 floors and has a 31-foot statue at the top. The statue's name is Ceres. Ceres is the Roman goddess of wheat and grain, said to be there because we trade most of the wheat and grain in the country inside that Board of Trade. The architects were a bit short-sighted. They did not give Ceres a face because they figured nobody would ever see it at that height. Busy driving the caissons that support Sears down into the bedrock of the river. So that tower goes 1/3 deep as it does tall. Meaning if you were to take the Statue of Liberty, place her into the basement of the Sears, only the tip of her torch would touch the lobby. The Sears climbs 110 stories. It is 1,454 feet tall, not including the height of the antennas. It's made of lead, houses 95 elevator cabs, and this one has its own window washing system built in because it's too dangerous to have people at those heights washing windows. And it's built and designed in a very different fashion from most buildings. Most are built in that pancake-like way, one floor on top of the next. Sears is built and designed in what's called tubular style. What that means is it consists of 9 75-square-foot rectangular tubes that are bundled together at different heights. So basically, if you were to take 9 straws, pull some up randomly, and then bundle them, that is sort of how the Sears was constructed, simply for additional support and protection against wind shear. It also has a unique feature called an 18-inch sway rotation factor, and what that means is that when we get strong winds coming in from the south, the Sears literally sways 18 inches to the north. If the winds come from the west, it'll sway to the east and vice versa. That is again to prevent any damage that would otherwise be caused by wind shearing at those heights. It held the title as the world's tallest building for over 25 years. That title now goes to the Petronas Petroleum Towers located in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia until another is soon completed. However, I would like to say that there is a council called the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, and they have 4 categories for measuring the heights of tall buildings, and Sears has the title in 3 of their 4 categories. Meaning Sears has the tallest occupied floor in the world, the tallest rooftop in the world, the tallest height to the top of an antenna in the world. We are not the tallest architectural structure because the towers in Malaysia have a spire on their rooftop, and spires are included in the height of a building, whereas antennas are not. I always think it's very important for all of you to know those fun facts about our Sears. If you don't know what a spire is, it sort of looks like a needle point, and we'll see one later on in this tour. So if you shift your eyes up a couple buildings to the right, you'll find this rosy granite building with the jagged corners. That is the Mercantile Exchange, known as the Merc. It's a 1987 Ichikawa and Johnson design. The jagged corners are called saw-tooth in architecture. What they do is provide you with 16 corner offices per floor rather than 4, making a lot of the traders and the renters in the Merc have campers. The architects for this building also won a lot of acclaim for the feat that they accomplished. So keep in mind, in between the 2 towers, there is a 10-story trading floor. And again, the traders use hand signals, and it needs to be clean of any obstruction. So what the architects did is they had their towers built first and gently slanting outward. They then hung their 10-story trading floor, and when they did, the towers righted themselves at exactly the 90-degree right angles that we see today. It was an incredible feat, Buildings still manage to earn some criticism, and that is because there's only this one little lonely tree to your right, and nowadays we would like more greenery along our river. One of the more pretty buildings in the city is to our right is the Civic Opera House, housing the Lyric Opera. This is a 1931 design by Grant Anderson Copes and White. It is Art Deco, and although it is beautiful with its decor, keep in mind we are looking at the back of the building, and if you were to stand in the front, you'd find about 10 times the amount of ornamentation. Also in the front, there's a loggia, and that's an Italian work covered walkway. It's very pretty. What I find pretty neat about this building is that if you were to stand in the plaza across the river and were to look at its footprint, it looks like a gigantic easy chair. That was done intentionally. The architects wanted to replicate that sit back and relax theme that's on the inside of the building on the exterior as well. So the same architect that designed the very pretty Opera House designed this much less attractive building to our right. It's known as the former Morton Thieknal building. It stood here from 59 on. It's made of brushed aluminum, glass, and limestone. Now, although it's not too easy on the eyes, it is a very significant building in the city right now, and that's because after we demolished the Sun Times last year, this is the only remaining example of that severe international style of architecture. Partly the reason Chicago is known to be impressive architecturally is because we have all these different examples. We want to keep this, and this building probably is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. Coming up on our right are two attractive red brick buildings. They're covered in ivy. They're called the Great Lake Buildings. They are in the Chicago School. If you look closely, there is a base shaft capital design. They got the ginkgo tree out in front. The ginkgo tree is the oldest tree known to man, having its origin in China. In 1860, these were here a wigwam was, and this is where we held the National Republic Convention. It's also the site where Abraham Lincoln was nominated for the presidency of the United States. So as we make the turn back into the main branch of the river, I want to talk about the next three buildings all together simply because they were all designed by the same firm. That firm is Cohen, Patterson & Fox. They're out of New York, but they're very well liked and well known in Chicago. They are known for their contextualism, and what that means is they are site sensitive. They match the buildings to match each other, match the site they were built on, or to match other pre-existing sites and materials. So the first glass rectangular building over your right shoulder is a brand new 2004 postmodern design named 191 North Wacker. To the left is the very beautiful green building, green to match the river, convex to bend with the river, also postmodern, built in '84. It's 333 West Wacker. The architects didn't want us to know that 20 years was between the two buildings. So what they did was line up the horizontal lines on the windows of 191 to match right up with the horizontal lines on 333. So right about now, it's supposed to look at a glance like one original tower. These architects also designed 225 West Wacker to our left. It's made of granite and glass, also postmodern, built in '89. If you look back at 333 and check out the base, you'll see there's those circular medallions that say height events. That shape is repeated in the lobby windows of 225. I apologize for all these numbers, it's confusing because of the names of the buildings. 225 looks much more traditional with the granite intentionally. It's considered to be a transitional building to transition us back into this main branch of the river where older, more traditional buildings are housed. The firm doesn't only complement their own work, they also complement other firms as well. The rooftop of 225 complements the rooftop of the merchandise mart across the river. One of Mayor Daley's most recent projects is out to your right. It will be a river walk that extends from the bridge that we just went under all the way to Michigan Avenue, and you'll have shops and restaurants along your walk. For those of you unfamiliar with that road to your right, it's called Wacker Drive. Wacker runs north, south, east, west, up, down, and you can exit from your left and your right. So if somebody to that route and you're not familiar, we always suggest the
Wacker Drive. Wacker my house.
Coming up on our right is a building named the Builders Building. They call it that because when it was built in 1827, it housed most of the city's construction trees. It's made of glazed brick and terracotta. In 1986, the architect Adrian Smith wanted to design a building built to the right of it. The lot was too small, so he attached his. He kept with the same scale, theme, and materials. He wove his windows for postmodernism. He's the guy that added the glass penthouse to unify the two structures. He did a great job of making it look like one original where you never know 60 years is between the two. Another Art Deco design, this one by Culliver and Rue, built in 1931, is over here to the right. It's called LaSalle Wacker. LaSalle Wacker is most known for its gigantic throne-like appearance because of the large setback. Keep in mind these setbacks are very common with Art Deco because when Art Deco was popular in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, we did not have the heating and cooling advances that we do today.
The building
So
Susan
these
works in.
setbacks function to provide additional light and shade to those inner offices. Thus, it's a heating and cooling function for the building itself. This tall, beautiful tower is the R.R. Donnelly Center, built in 1992, designed by the Spanish architect Ricardo Gil. It is postmodern. It's actually considered a neoclassical tower. This one features the white granite strips that run up the tower. The strips look very curvy, and that's exactly what they're intended to do. They serve no structural purpose at all. That use of glass is silver reflective. It's the only type of that glass on the river. It's often described as giving the building a very light and airy effect, almost like you can see right through it. This next tall gray granite building is the Leo Burnett Building. It was built in 1989. It was designed by two well-known Irish architects, Kevin Roche and John Bigelow. Leo Burnett is also postmodern, but it borrows heavily from Chicago School. When you look closely, again, there's an A-shaft capital design. Also, you notice with this one, all the windows are recessed and they're divided in half by the stainless steel bars. The bars are actually functional. They catch the light from the sun to light up the offices inside. And folks, we have a gentleman standing on the next bridge, and he is known as the Suit Man. And if we give him a good hoot and holler, he will spin around for us. So can you help me out? Woohoo! Suit Man! Woohoo! This guy's a landmark in himself. He's out here for every single tour on the weekends, and he changes suits in between. He only wears like, that's the most pink I've ever seen him. He usually wears like bright green or bright pink glitter suits, and he spins around. Rumor has it he's a retired businessman that lives in the Hardtop Towers. That's all he's known as, and all he responds to is the suit man. Anyway, over here on our right is the Jewelers Building. It was built in 27. It is a landmark building in Chicago. Beautiful. It's designed to look like a 15th century Italian monastery. Up in the very top of that building in the Belvedere is said to be where Chicago's most famous gangster, Al Capone, called the Speakeasy during the Prohibition era. Attached to the whole house, second one is another Art Deco design. This one is the Mather Tower, very slender. It was built in 1928 and it stood as the tallest building in Chicago at 42 floors. About 3 years ago, it was discovered that 7 floors near the top of the tower were structurally unsafe. So what Chicago did was got 2 helicopters to come in. They lifted the top crown of the building off, which if you look way up in the sun, it's whiter than the rest of the building. They placed the crown on a barge on the river, went back up and removed the 7 floors, and about a year and a half ago lifted the crown and put it right back on top of the Mather Tower. Very determined, to say the least. Over here on our right is again that Crane Communications building. This building is most notably known by Chicagoans as the historical site for Fort Dearborn. It's a 1923 Albert Ashler design, made entirely of Indiana limestone. It's in concrete to meet the intersection of Michigan Avenue and Wacker Drive. Of the Wrigley has the 11-story clock tower. It was built and completed in 1921. The Wright building was completed in 24. The two are attached by a skywalk on the 14th level. The Wrigley is another great example of Chicago School of Architecture. The building itself is clad in 6 different shades of white terracotta. It is cleaned meticulously, meaning it's hand washed with a brush once every 3 years to keep it that white and that bright. Little fun fact about Mr. Wrigley is that he originally came to Chicago from New York City to sell soap. His product wasn't doing too well, so he put the incentive of a piece of chewing gum in the wrapping. People like the gum and not the soap, and obviously the rest is history, as that remains the headquarters for Wrigley today.
Oh, really?
Now, if you peek to your right, you'll find a beautiful building peeking through that has a needlepoint. That needlepoint is a spire. That's what's included in the height of the building. That's called Two Prudential. It's modeled to look like the Chrysler Building in New York City. It's a 1990 logo and Hackle design. It's postmodern and made in granite glass. For those of you that recall our sailor architect, Harry Deese, Harry likes to use triangles for that nautical theme. He designed the Swiss Hotel for us. It's coming up on your right. It's the all-glass structure in the shape of one large equilateral triangle. It too is postmodern, and it's known to be one of the better hotels in the city because no matter where you're at, you're supposed to have a pretty decent view. These states became very upset with the state of Illinois, and they began to sue us in the 1930s. And that's because when we had reversed our river 30 years prior to that, we started to suck a lot of the lake water into our river and down the Mississippi. So they feared that their drinking supply would dwindle away. So what Chicago did was in 1938, they called in the Army Corps of Engineers to build us the Chicago Lock. The lock is directly behind me. It's a grid-like system over the water, and you'll see it when we turn the boat. The lock controls the traffic that goes from the river to the lake and vice versa. It also regulates the amount of lake water we get in our river. Now the way it does this in the simple version is if we wanted to go to the lake, like these boats that are waiting, we'd simply wait for them to open up this first gate. We'd pull in and dock to the right-hand side. They'd shut the riverfront gate, they'd open up the lakefront gate, and about 8 million gallons of lake water would come in. That would raise the boats 4 feet, and that would match the elevation of the lake. We then send the boats outward towards the lake. When the reverse is happening, we're coming back into the river. We get that 8 million gallons of lake water each time the riverfront gate is open to let the boats back. We need the water, we need the lake water to actually help the river to flow west, otherwise it would sit still. It's just regulated in terms of how much we get each day. What's pretty neat about the lock, it is very old-fashioned. There is no schedule, rhyme, or rhythm to when these gates open or shut. It simply depends on who's working. So sometimes we'll have 2 boats out here, sometimes we'll have 22. Most people don't mind, it's pretty out here, but it is old-fashioned. Behind me and in front of you is Navy Pier. Navy Pier was originally built in 1916, and then it was called Municipal Pier. It served as a naval training base in World War II. It was then the campus for the University of Illinois from the 40s through the 60s. In 1993, the renovation began to turn it into the huge entertainment complex and tourist attraction that it is today. It has more shops, museums, restaurants, and theaters that I could care to mention right now, but I do know you could spend a couple days there easily and probably still not see it all. A well-known building to most Chicagoans is this one on your right, this tall black tower. That is Lake Point Tower, built in 1968, designed by John Henrik and George Shipirow. Keep in mind, those 2 architects were students of that famous architect Mies van der Rohe. And to show you what a futuristic thinker this Mies guy was, this was Mies's design. He wanted this building built in Berlin in the early 1930s. He never had that opportunity because he fled Germany and came here. So basically, 2 students kind of adopted his design, added some height, and at 70 floors tall, that was the tallest apartment building in the world when it was built. No longer has that title and has been renovated into condos. It was the first use ever of curved glass. The glass is curved and calculated so that not one resident can look into another resident's unit directly. At the very top of the tower, there's a circular tap. The tap houses a French restaurant. It's called Cité. It is known to be one of the better restaurants in Chicago, open to the public with an excellent view. The tower's been home to many famous tenants. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell have lived there. Oprah has lived there. And our former Cubs player, Sammy Sosa, owned an entire floor there. The popularity is that it's popular because it's the only building built east of Lakeshore Drive. And that is because there's a law in Chicago that says nobody can build east of Lakeshore Drive to keep our 26 miles of lakefront clean of any obstruction. Lake Point Tower was built in a loophole in the law. It's built on landfill and not land. So after it was built, we made another law saying no one can build on land, landfill, water, whatnot, anything east of Lakeshore Drive. Folks, there are 56 bridges over our river. We go under 22 or 44 if you guys want to count that round trip. And all the bridges have these old bridge houses. They used to be manned, they no longer are. We have something unique in our city called bridge runners. These are guys that actually run or ride from bridge to bridge to raise them when we need them risen. Especially during times like today, if you're visiting your river at the time of the flotilla. The flotilla is 4 weeks at the end of the spring and at the end of the fall. In the spring, it gives the sailboats and the stockyards a chance to make it out to the harbor, so the bridges are going up and down daily. They don't raise them very often at all in the summer because you need to pay for them to be risen, so it takes someone very prestigious to come through. It's a traffic nightmare. Over here to your right are the Riverview condominiums and townhomes. They were built in 2000, designed by Des Stefano. These ones feature 16 townhomes wrapped along the base. They're all 4 levels, half with a terrace, and they're selling for about $1.5 million.
Oh no.
The one-bedroom condominiums feature 1,500 square feet of space, and they begin selling at $500 grand. Now, phase 1 directly in front of us was so successful that phase 2 up the river began about a year and a half ago and is very close to completion. As of last November, phase 2 is 99% sold out. We expect that it's probably completely sold out by today. As a side note, if you look out to your right where these women are walking, that is our river walk. You can catch that walk directly across the street from where you boarded this boat in Michigan Avenue. It takes you all the way to Navy Pier. It's actually a really nice walk on a nice day or night. You get a lot of good restaurants, pubs, and shops along your way. This fountain on your right is the Nicholas J. Mellis Fountain, erected in '89. And out in front of the fountain, you'll find this little marble pyramid sitting on top of the no docking sign. That little pyramid shoots out a spout of water that arcs over the river every hour on the hour for 10 minutes. It's actually really pretty. When we first did this, we thought it would be so much fun to light up all the boats people underneath that arc, and all of us would just love it. However, it doesn't work when the water pours downward and we get soaked with some tightly polluted river water. So we time our boats so that we don't hit that arc. Considering the fact that it is a working river, we have hit it in the past, just last week. And on those days, we hope for a very carefree, laid-back sort of crowd, because you're not just getting sprinkled, you're tripping when you get off the boat. Over here to your right is the Sheraton Hotel, built in '92, designed by Coldwell Benz. It's the 4th largest hotel in Chicago. It's got about 1,000 rooms. It's most known for its 4th floor banquet facility. It's the largest in the city. Actually, it's the largest in the States. It's about the size of a football field, and again, this was clean of any obstruction. The architect that will be designing the new Trump Tower, Adrian Smith, designed a very attractive NBC tower coming into view to your right. NBC was built in '89, but it looks like a building that could be out of the 40s or 50s. That is because it is postmodern, but it borrows heavily from Art Deco references. That will be the exact same theme for the new Trump Tower, and again, the same architect. Dark panels, dark tinted windows, the limestone, and the vertical setbacks that are all characteristic of Art Deco architecture. On the side you can't see they have their own 4-story broadcasting studio, and that's where they broadcast a lot of shows here in Chicago. This next building that's coming up on your right, it has the impressive use of glass along the east and south sides. It's called the Gleacher Center. It was built in '93, and it's a campus building for the University of Chicago. The architect for it, Dirk Lohan, is highly criticized for it, and you'll see that as we pass by, there are no windows along the entire west end of the building. Dirk was asked why, considering its riverfront location, and his response was simply, that is where the classrooms are housed, and students should be studying and not looking out the window. He took drastic measures to make that the case. In 1922, the Chicago Tribune Company, that's one of 2 of our major union newspapers, announced to the world one of the world's largest architectural contests ever. They said, who can design us the most beautiful office building in the world? Come design ours and win $100,000 cash prize. 263 entries is what they received, and the architects Hood and Howell won, with their Gothic-like design of the Tribune Tower that we are very slowly inching upon, and that's because our dock is busy, so be patient with us. The Tribune Tower is not this bland, equitable building that you're looking at. It's this beautiful one coming into view to your right. It was built in 1925. It's made entirely of Indiana limestone, and this one features the gargoyle gutters and the flying buttresses near the top of it to reference the Gothic style of architecture. That with the rigging makes the gateway to what is known as the Magnificent Maya. And again, as a side note, if you wanted to go check out the Trib on foot, it's pretty neat because at eye level you'll see pieces of stone and rock ingrained in the actual building from all over the world, and it will tell you what structure, the Berlin Wall, the Great Wall of China, etc. So it's pretty neat to look at it that way. Over my head on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, there are 3 flags. You have the U.S., Illinois, and Chicago. Chicago has the 2 blue stripes. The 2 blue stripes stand for the north and south branches of the Chicago River. The 3 white stripes stand for land on the north, west, and south sides of the city. And the 4 red stars are landmarks. They're your 1803 site of Fort Dearborn, your 1871 Chicago Fire, your 1893 World's Fair, and the 1933 Century of Progress Reward. So on that note, on behalf of the captain, the crew, and myself, I'd like to say thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed your tour. Most importantly, have a great night and have a safe trip to your home. Thank you.